Okay, guys. Hi, everyone. Welcome to my kitchen on a Wednesday night. You guys, we are talking about such an exciting subject tonight. Dairy, the great controversy, what everybody wants to know about. I'll wait for a few people to jump on and then we're going to dive right into it. Um, Facebook Live on a Wednesday night. I don't know where you guys are dialing in from, but it has been an absolutely beautiful day here in Perth. We've had sunshine, looking like winter might be finally over, and it's been great to get out and get a bit of vitamin D. So if you are here, I always ask if you can just jump in and give me a little wave, so I know that you can hear me and I know that we're ready to go. And then we're going to dive into the subject of dairy. I decided to do this live tonight because so many of my clients ask me, should I eat dairy? Should I not eat dairy? Should I feed it to my kids? It seems to be one of those questions, and we're flooded with so much information from the old food pyramid to the internet to the doctors and other practitioners and people and their opinions, and it can be almost impossible to decide for yourself whether dairy is a good food for you. So hopefully I will be able to answer those questions for you guys tonight. I'm going to take you through my whole full take on dairy, and I'm going to answer anything that you need to know. So please just give me a little like and a wave if you're here, and ask me anything. You guys, as you go, I'm open book. You can use me for questions and answers. I am here to help. But yeah, definitely it was time for me to jump on and do a live about dairy because it's something that so many of us, I think, struggle with. And one of the things that people don't realize when they've come to me in my practice, they go, oh, well, I went off dairy for a couple of weeks and I just didn't really even feel any better. Hi, Sammy. I didn't really feel any better. So I don't think that dairy is a problem for me. So one of the first things that I want to let you guys know is if you do a dairy elimination diet, it's got to be for 6 to 8 weeks. It can take that long for dairy to leave your system. So really, really important that if you're going to do a dairy elimination, you actually do it really strict for 6 to 8 weeks and then decide whether your body feels better or not. But I'm going to take you guys through kind of the breakdown of dairy, what happens in your body when you eat dairy. We know a lot about lactose now, right? So you can get like lactose-free products. Is that a good thing? Is that the only problem with dairy? Is there more than that? I'm going to take you guys through that. I'm going to talk about dairy today versus dairy way back when our ancestors were eating it, and we'll talk about the differences in modern dairy and how that's perhaps impacted us. You guys can ask me anything. You can ask me anything about your kids and whether they should be having dairy, and I'll be happy to answer them either now or I'll jump back on later tonight and type out some answers too. So my biggest thing with dairy, right? We love our dairy. We all love our dairy, but the question is, does it love us back? Somebody asked me once, I don't eat any dairy, by the way. Dairy's a no food for me personally. But somebody said to me once, oh, don't you just miss cheese? And I said, of course I miss cheese. It's like having my left arm cut off. Of course I do. You know, it's one of those foods. It's like sugar. It tastes really, really, really good. And we all love our dairy. But the question is, does it love your body back? And I'm going to teach you guys how to unpack that in your own brains so that you can make educated decisions as to whether dairy is a good food for you or not. Hey, Lisa. So let's talk a little bit about it. We've been told for years and years and years that dairy is a high calcium food. You need it for your bones. You've got to feed it to your kids. And one of the things that I want to enlighten you guys to is those recommendations came from the old food pyramid. Sammy, I'll come back to your question about eczema. That's a great one. So the old food pyramid, you guys, also told us to eat 5 servings of cereals and bread a day. Look where that got us. So I'm just saying that the guidelines for dairy, number one, there actually haven't been any proven studies around the whole dairy and calcium and bone thing conclusively. And secondly, those guidelines came from the very same guidelines as the old food pyramid, which also said, like I said, to eat 5 servings of grains and cereals, bread every day, to avoid all fats, even the healthy ones, and to not have any salt. And we all did that. So we ate a ton of dairy and a ton of cereal and a ton of bread, and we didn't have any salt and we didn't have any healthy fats. And we got really sick as a nation, as a society, because those guidelines were wrong. And whether they felt that they were right back then, or whether the guidelines were skewed, or the studies, whatever the reasons were, a lot of it is not correct. Okay, so that's the first thing I just want to bring to your attention, is just because we've been told that dairy is that source of calcium that we need, that's old information now. Okay, so we're on the 2020 train. So that's the first thing. Breaking down dairy, right? There's things that people don't know. We know about the lactose, right? So lactose is a sugar in milk. And it requires an enzyme in the gut to digest. So a lot of people who go dairy-free will go onto lactose-free products, right? And they might feel a little bit better because on the gut it's a bit easier, but there's more to dairy than that. There's lactose, right, which is a bit of an issue for some people, and we'll break this down. The sugar in the milk. There's casein, which is the protein in the milk that your immune system can have a reaction to. Sam, coming back to your question, what about dairy and eczema in kids? Now, eczema is an immune system's reaction to something that it has tagged as an invader in the body. And often the immune system, or most of the time, will react to a protein. So reactions from dairy that manifest as eczema or skin conditions or ear infections or throat infections, sinuses, all of that can be your immune system tagging that protein as an invader and saying, hey, mount a response, kill, attack, because it doesn't necessarily know the difference between the dairy protein and a flu virus. It kind of mimics the reaction the same way. So dairy can be very inflammatory to the body because of that casein protein. Mark's asked a question, I have a vegan athlete, are they more prone to stress fractures? Great question, Mark. I'm coming to the calcium thing in just a minute, so stick with me. I'm going to talk very specifically about calcium in your bones, okay? So we talked about the lactose, you guys, all right? There's the casein in the protein in the dairy, which is another problem. But that's not all. So a lot of people have gotten to the casein bit, but the other things to consider is the hormones in the milk. And I'm not talking about artificially added hormones. I'm talking about the hormones from the mama cow for the baby cow, right? So if you put a bunch of hormones that were not meant for your body into your body, you might get hormone problems as a result. We're going to go into that a little bit more, okay? And the last thing, my kind of thing that I like to raise with people about dairy, the lactose, the casein, the hormones in the milk, but also what are these cows being fed? You know, the feed, the antibiotics, the medications that they're pumped full of, all of that stuff translates directly into your body, and I'll tell you how, because animals store toxins in their fat just like we do. And so the fat in the milk and the quality of the milk is going to be compromised if that animal was in a, kind of a barren field and being fed a bunch of grains and being injected with a bunch of hormones. That's going to directly translate into your body. And what happens is those things that come through that milk into your body's going to go, hey, I don't recognize this as food. That's not a nutrient that I was designed to use, and it's going to have a reaction. So the kind of reactions that you may have to dairy, things that you know about, things that you don't know about, because dairy can be a compounding effect with reactions. Sometimes it's not immediate. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it can happen over 72 hours and longer. So you might get bloating, you might get IBS type symptoms, you might get some real gut problems, you might get eczema, you might get breakouts, you might get hormonal imbalances that you don't relate to dairy at all because of those things that we've talked about. You may get toxic overload on your liver if you're drinking a bunch of milk from really poor quality cows simply by all of the toxins that cow's ingesting that comes into your body. ENT problems in children, ear infections. We talked about sinus, lungs, asthma. That can all be the immune system's reaction to the dairy. So it's very difficult to pinpoint via your symptoms, yes, I'm reactive to dairy or I'm not, unless you're having a true allergic reaction, okay? The body can manifest these things in many, many different ways. So, Marky, I'm getting to the calcium thing in a minute. I just want to take you guys kind of through a bit more of a breakdown about it, okay? Let's talk about some of the reasons why dairy is difficult for your body. So I like to use that term difficult because we're all very attached to our dairy and we're on the fence. Should I have it? Should I not? My job here is to educate you guys, to help you to see it through a different lens and then to make that decision for yourself. Okay? So let's talk about your gut. First of all, we've talked about the fact that milk has something called lactose in it, okay? And that lactose, the sugar in milk, has to be broken down in your gut in order for any kind of nutrients to be absorbed. Now, the lactose in milk requires an enzyme called lactase, right? That will come from your gut and help you to break down that sugar in the dairy. Now, here's the thing that most people don't know. When we wean from the breast, when we're babies, okay, and this happens for kids really between 2 to 5 years old naturally, but let's just say when we wean from the mother's breast and we're no longer having that breast milk, your body will naturally stop producing the enzyme lactase. It's very clever, your body. It goes, hey, I haven't got any more mother's milk coming in. I don't need that enzyme, and it will stop producing that enzyme, okay? What happens then is if you don't have the enzyme lactase, and about at least 70% of the population don't have that because your body's very clever and it stopped producing it when you stop breastfeeding. If you don't have that enzyme, you can't break the lactose down, okay? And that's where you start to get IBS, constipation, wind, bloating, all of those kind of digestive symptoms of eating dairy is purely because your clever body stopped producing the enzyme that you needed, okay? It wasn't anticipating that we were now going to start having milk from an animal in place of milk from our own mother. That's not how the human race was sort of designed. So the first thing I want you to think about is your gut. There's about 30% of the population is estimated that can still produce the enzyme lactase. So that could potentially digest and break down that lactose in the milk, okay? If you believe that you're one of those 30%, then that's okay. We'll go through the rest of it about dairy and you'll decide, is dairy a healthful food for you or not? But predominantly when children wean, and for the rest of us adults, we just don't have the enzyme to break it down. You can go lactose-free milk, but then we'll talk about the rest of it now, right? So we've talked about that. And also don't forget that lactose is a sugar, okay? That's a conversation for another day. We talk about the casein. You know, I've talked about the protein in milk. Your immune system is highly reactive to proteins. That's what it's there for, particularly if you have leaky gut. It's going to react to proteins that it was never otherwise supposed to see. And casein is a highly inflammatory protein to the body. Very, very difficult for us to process, and the immune system will very often mount a response to that casein, that protein in the dairy. So if you've gone onto lactose-free milk and you're still not feeling amazing on dairy, could be that the problem is the protein, all right? So things, for example, like ghee in place of butter, ghee in the separation process of how they make it has had the majority, 99.9% of that casein removed. So all that's left is just the oil of milk. So if you're a butter lover, you can always try ghee as an alternative. Okay, so your immune system, if it sees that casein protein in the dairy, is likely going to have an inflammatory response. You might get skin conditions, you might get swollen and inflamed, you might get joint pain. There's a number of different things that can happen, and you certainly will be very inflamed in your gut. So we've talked about the protein in dairy being the problem. This is my favorite one to teach people about, and it's really confronting, so I warn you, but let's talk about the hormones, okay? What is milk? Milk is made by a mama cow to grow a baby cow. Fact, okay? That is what milk is designed for in nature. It's to grow baby cows. So there are two problems with that when it comes to humans, you guys. And I'm not saying that this is a problem for you. I'm just saying I want you to open your mind and consider it. If milk is designed to grow baby cows, just like mama's milk is designed to grow baby humans, then if we drink a lot of milk, we're likely to grow. So I say to my clients, if you want to grow lots and lots and lots of stuff on your body, then by all means consume a lot of dairy, even though, you know, it's not good for your gut, the casein and the lactose. But we must be mindful of the fact that from a growth perspective, dairy is there to make baby cows grow. It's full of those nutrients, and so the same, in essence, applies to human beings. So if you want to grow, maybe dairy is your friend. The second thing with the hormones, you guys, is can you imagine all of those hormones that are designed to grow a baby cow? If you put those hormones in your body, not only is it a huge strain on your liver, that's going to mess with your endocrine system. So it's what we call an endocrine disruptor, because if your body perceives all of these hormones coming in, it might go, oh, okay, well, I've got enough of that. I'll stop producing that. And all the messenger signals get thrown out of whack because it's not used to this influx of hormones that it has not produced on its own naturally. Okay, so it's a little bit like taking birth control that can really mess with your hormones later on in life. If there's a bunch of hormones in the milk to grow the baby cow, that's going to be difficult for your body to figure out. So again, coming back to that concept of dairy can be a very difficult food for your body for a number of reasons. Ask your questions, guys, if you want to. All right, Mark, your question, if you're still with me. Lisa, I'll come to dairy alternatives. Great question. Mark had a question about a vegan athlete, so obviously no dairy. Are they more prone to stress fractures? Okay, let's bust the calcium myth. So calcium is, of course, an extremely important mineral for the body. Here's what they didn't tell you about calcium though, guys. Vitamin D is the kind of magic agent. Vitamin D is what your bones use, and vitamin D is a cofactor in calcium absorption. So before we even look at dairy and whether that's got the most amount of calcium, which I can tell you that it doesn't, if you're consuming a bunch of dairy and calcium, or even taking calcium supplements, and you don't have great vitamin D levels, or you're not absorbing through the sunshine and through your food loads of vitamin D, you will never be able to use that calcium in your body. So please, those of you, I'm so passionate about older clients. I have quite a few elderly clients that I work with. Please get your vitamin D levels checked, because you can take all the calcium supplements in the world, but you need that vitamin D as a cofactor to use it. So Marky, looking at your vegan athlete, let's talk about calcium in foods. It's a complete myth, you guys, a very old part of science, that dairy has the most amount of calcium. You can get a beautiful amount of calcium out of foods like salmon, which, by the way, will have vitamin D in it. Salmon, especially salmon that's got the bones in. Foods like broccoli have a large amount of calcium. Kale, leafy greens. There's an abundance of other foods that are extremely healthy and don't carry the risks of dairy, where you can get plenty of calcium. You have to remember it's about the available calcium in the food. So if dairy is a very difficult thing for your body to break down because you don't have the enzyme, or because it's inflammatory and your immune system doesn't like it, you're going to go a long way before you actually get the calcium out of it. Whereas a food like salmon or broccoli, most people are pretty good with those foods. So they're my preference, right, for calcium alternatives. So Marky, if you had a vegan athlete, look, I work with vegans only through extremely clean nutrition and supplementation. But the fact that they're not eating dairy is not necessarily the calcium issue, is what I'm saying to you. They would definitely need to be looking at plant-based sources of calcium, and or, of course, supplementing everything else. Liesl asked, what are your dairy alternatives, like coffee and meals and that sort of thing? Yeah, I'll get to that, Liesl. That's a great question, talking about what do we have if we don't have dairy. So we talked about the calcium myth, you guys, and how you can do things like salmon and broccoli and those sorts of things are going to give you heaps of calcium. But without vitamin D, calcium doesn't mean anything in the body. So the whole bone thing, really, that's where I would be looking first. As a functional nutritionist, that's what I do. And then the last thing on that list that I talked about, my 4 kind of things to consider with dairy: the lactose, the casein, the hormones for the baby cow. And then the 4th thing is, what are these cows being fed? You've really got to look at the quality of your dairy. So if we think back to our ancestors, or think back to the olden days, and when they were consuming dairy, it was raw, cultured, properly fermented yogurt. The milk was straight from the cow. The cows were out grazing in the beautiful lush fields. So the quality of that dairy was much higher than the processed dairy that we have today. And secondly, that fermentation process of those natural yogurts and kefir and those sorts of things helps to start the breakdown process so that it's not as difficult on your gut. So these days, the cows are like in a barren paddock, they're being grain fed, they're being pumped full of hormones. Often the milk's like low fat, it's had the best part taken off. And the end result that you get in the supermarket is really not nutrient dense at all. So, and full of toxins that animal has been subjected to, that's then going in your body. So that's a real consideration for dairy too. I say to my clients who do like to consume dairy or do believe that they don't have an issue with dairy, and if they want to continue, it's got to be raw, organic, straight from the field, properly cultured yogurt. You really want to look at the quality of your dairy so that you're actually getting some nutrients out of it. Because otherwise it's just not like it used to be. Who remembers the days of getting the like the fresh milk from the farm in the glass bottles delivered in the crate from the milkman to your door? We used to get a bottle of, I think it was like 2 bottles of milk and an orange juice and a guava juice or something when I was living in South Africa and I was younger. And it was beautiful. It was, obviously, and the cream on the top was like that. I'm still not saying that dairy for me was certainly not a food that I should have been consuming, but I'm highlighting to you guys how different it is versus the milk that we pick up in the supermarket today and where that's come from. And all of that goes into your body, right? So coming back to Liesel's question, dairy alternatives, guys, you've got coconut products, you've got nut milk products. I talked about ghee as a great alternative to butter because it doesn't have a lot of that casein in it. So that's an option for you. One of my favorite easily accessible milks that doesn't taste like watery almond milk is Cocoa Quench. If you guys are in Australia, Cocoa Quench, you can get it at the supermarket. Most kids love it. It's free from any nasties, and that's a pretty good alternative. There's some great coconut yogurts and stuff out there now that you can do. Let's just talk about soy for a minute, guys. A lot of my clients have come to me who have gotten off the dairy train and onto the soy train. Please don't do that. Soy in small amounts can be okay for people, but in large amounts, when you're replacing a large amount of dairy with a large amount of soy is an endocrine disruptor. It's really difficult for your hormones, and it's very difficult for you to break down in your gut. So really not great to swap dairy for soy, but certainly things like coconut or nut milks. For those of you who can do grain, you could look at like a rice milk. There's plenty of options out there now. You can make your own milks. Like cashew milk is literally just soak the cashews overnight and then blend it in the NutriBullet with some water the next day, and it goes nice and creamy. There's lots of different alternatives. You can get now at Woolies and Coles, there's some brands like the BioLife cheese. That's like a vegan cheese. I just always encourage you to read your labels and make a conscious choice of what you're putting in your body. If you're swapping a dairy for something else, it's kind of like swapping steak for the Beyond Meat vegan meats. Steak's got like one ingredient, it's got steak, and then you look at Beyond Meat and it's got like 19 ingredients, none of them are good for your body. So just be careful when you're swapping and making alternatives that you're really being a detective label reader. Mark said cozies and sunshine, clean food. Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty simple. A little bit of sleep in there, and yeah, you're exactly right. So guys, my take on dairy is it's a personal choice and it's a journey. It's not easy coming off the dairy. It's something that we've all held on to for so long. But there are much more healthful alternatives out there. You weigh up for yourself, but if you think about, do you have the enzyme to still break down that milk, or did you stop when you weaned from your mama's breast, when you were younger, ages of 2 to 5? What about the casein? What's your immune system doing? Do you have leaky gut? Are you reactive to other proteins like gluten, for example? Do you have any skin conditions or mucus in your sinuses and your ears and stuff? Think about the casein and how difficult that is for your body to break down. Think about the hormones that make the baby cow grow, that would likely make a human grow and are also difficult for your liver to process, and your endocrine system can get really out of whack if you're consuming a bunch of hormone-laden dairy. And then think about the quality. Are you sourcing raw, organic, unpasteurized, properly fermented and cultured, or is it just another processed food that's been labeled as a health food because we need the calcium? Think about the calcium that I've talked about that you can get from other beautiful foods out in Mother Nature that don't carry these inflammatory risks. And the vitamin D that I talked about, making sure that you're getting safe amounts of sunshine is so critical for your body. Think about what these animals are being fed, and whether you want that going into your body. And then I think, come to an educated decision. For me personally, I recommend that most of my clients go off dairy for a period of 6 to 8 weeks to see how they feel and to give their bodies a rest. Remember, I said, regardless of all of these things, whether you're a dairy lover or not, it's a difficult food for your body, okay? So if you're on a healing journey and you're wanting to really, clean up your body and anti-inflame and give your, heal your gut and those sorts of things, then dairy might be a difficult food. It might be a food that you go, hey, that's not really for me right now. I do specific reintroduction protocols with my clients. If you want to go back on dairy after you've eliminated it, things like hard cheeses or cooked cheeses can sometimes be much better tolerated by the body. So many people will say to me, oh, I can do cheese, but I can't do milk. For example, it makes me feel sick. So there are levels of tolerance with dairy that you might find that you're one of those people. But on the whole, I think for me, it's a question of really whether all of those risks and facts about dairy, whether there's enough benefit there for you. So if you have questions about it, guys, please ask me. Throw them down. I'll answer them anytime. You can PM me if you don't want to pop them on a public forum. I think that's pretty much my take on it. I hope that you guys have found this helpful. I love doing Facebook Lives for you. And just as always, guys, be educated about your food choices. You make your decisions. You know what feels right for your body. If you don't know, please come and see me. You guys can check out my website via my Facebook page. I've got lots of new exciting meal plans on there, ways that you can work with me, weekly coaching, packages, gut healing, gut testing, you name it. You can do it all with me. If you just want to have a consult and talk about a subject like this and how I can help your family, I would love to do that. So you guys have a beautiful Wednesday night, and I will see you next week.